And then let me welcome our panel members to the stage who I'm going to stop sharing here and uh, welcome our panelists. And let me see here. Um, I am going to bring them onto the stage, and then we are going to get things going. And John, uh, before we kick this off, when I was talking about the community for retired women, John said, "Are there any similar options for retired men? Men face many similar issues." Uh, Very good point, John. And uh, we've discovered the same thing with solo aging is that sometimes the solo aging support groups seem to be dominated by women, and oftentimes there'll be a man there. It's like, hey, is anybody representing the male voice? So this might be a discussion topic that we go on, but I'm gonna look into that for you, John. Anyways, it's great to see the three of you here today, all together. I've had each of you individually on our discussions, so I'm really charged up that we were able to mesh calendars and have this discussion today with all three of you. Um, Before we dive into the discussion, let's get to know the three of you. And based on the Brady Bunch arrangement that I've got here, let me start with Ailene, and then I'll go to Sara and Nancy. Ailene, tell us a little bit about your background and what led you down this path of solo aging guidance and thought leading.
So I'm in my second career as an independent healthcare advocate. I have my own business. I work with people navigating the healthcare system. I have a background in nonprofit work, working on college campuses. And so a through line for me is community education. And so I've been very fortunate to partner with a number of organizations locally and nationally to offer community education talks. And at the very beginning of that cycle of giving talks, people would come up to me and say, "Can you be my healthcare proxy as a healthcare advocate? My wife is my only family member, etc." And so looking for that answer. And when that kept happening over and over again with that, and how do I make new connections and how do I expand my support, I decided to do a deep dive into solo aging. And fortunately, Sara had written a fabulous book and some others had written additional books. And I was able to really utilize that foundation to really hit the ground running and be able to engage people.
That's
So,
wonderful. And I'm just sharing your website. It's
gotcha.
your organization's name is Beacon Patient Solutions.
Yeah.
I'll drop that link into chat, but it's also, folks, at the bottom of your screen, you should have a little button that says resources. There's links to all of our speakers there and to their websites. All right. Thank you. Ailene, did I
Yep.
call you Ailene or Eileen when I introduced?
Ailene, but that's
I
okay.
knew I was going to do that. I can't believe it. It's Ailene. Okay. Sara, um, tell us a little bit about your background, and I believe you were the person credited with coining this phrase solo aging.
Yeah, I when I first started looking at solo aging as a thing, the only term out there for people who didn't have family support was elder orphan. And I absolutely hated that term, and most people I knew hated that term. So I came up with solo ager, and that seems to have stuck. And I'm really happy to see people using it. People in the press use it, people in the medical community now use it. So I'm thrilled with that. So my backstory is this, of course, is also a second career for me. After being a management and leadership consultant in Silicon Valley for 20 plus years, I I kind of noticed that a lot of my contemporaries and friends were taking care of their aging parents and spending a lot of time doing that. And I was I had an opportunity to talk to a friend of mine who'd been really spending a tremendous amount of time doing it, and I said, "Well, what's up?" And she was flying back and forth to the East Coast and meeting with senior living communities and talking to real estate people on behalf of her mother. And when she got done with this whole description of what she was doing, I said, "Sandy, you and I don't have children. Who's going to do that for us?" And that was really the question that led me on the trajectory I'm on today. And it led me ultimately to do the research and to write the book, and start to bring solo aging into the common language. And I'm so thankful to Ailene and Nancy and the rest of we have a group called Pros Working with Solo Agers. And together we're all kind of pulling the attention to the term solo aging and to the number of the sheer number of solo agers that's out there, especially among baby boomers, is yeah, it's pretty startling, and it bears witness to the fact that we need this information.
Oh, I totally agree. And I shared your website, and that's in chat as well. And I did see a question that popped up. Sue asks, when did you actually come up, what year did you come up with that term solo aging?
I'm going to say it was 2013 or 2014. The
Holy
book
cow.
came out in 2018, and it was well before the book.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I didn't hear the term until the pandemic, when I was doing one of these webinars and somebody referred to them as a solo. And I was like, wow, this is great, because none of us would refer to ourselves as elder orphans. In fact,
right.
I'd start crying every time I just say that term. Okay. Nancy, let's get to know you a little bit better. And I've gotten to know you personally. In fact, went to your hometown one time in Greenville, South Carolina. But tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. And thank you, Steve, for hosting this panel today. I was an undergrad social worker and spent many years working in agencies and with state government and privately owned companies. And it was when I was in an employee assistance program, an EAP. I was your call center gal with a headset on, and trying to bring solutions to people that were calling in. I was on the elder care team and the legal team, so a lot of my questions focus on the same concerns that many of us solo agers have. My parents started changing and aging, and I was running around, and I and my sister and I thought we were the two best daughters on the planet to handle all that was before us. And we quickly found that when we were in the middle of it with our folks trying to navigate healthcare and elder matters, there was debacle. And maybe I was a little verbose about what was going on with me, but people were saying, you should hang out your shingle. And it was I could never, and then it was a maybe, and then it became okay, I will. So in 2013, I founded an agency in North Carolina called Navigate NC. Did that for 11 years. Boots on ground, complex care management, and patient advocacy services. And then in 2022, I relocated to Greenville, South Carolina, and now my practice is one of working online, consulting on healthcare navigation, which quickly spills over into legal and financial and insurance and housing and support. And so, now I work in triage fashion. I'm kind of a launch pad for people to figure out, how do I start, or I'm stuck or stymied, and I need to know that I'm on the right path.
I love it. This is great. And I just shared Nancy's website. It's in chat. It's also in that little resources tab. So hopefully that helps you all connect with any of our panelists after the event. And I also want to mention to folks, we're going to try something different today. If you've been on our discussions before, we'll have these discussions and we communicate via chat. But if you're interested in meeting folks face to face, we're going to have a little after party in a breakout room. And so be thinking about it. If you've got a few minutes to hang out and meet some other folks that are tuned into this, I'll prompt you at the end when we're done. Okay, let's.
I'm sorry, Steve. Before we go on, I just wanted to put out the resource of the Navigating Solo Network also.
Okay.
As part of a resource that hopefully people can tap into for solo agers. It has a whole resource library of recorded presentations and interviews with people on this screen and other screens you've seen. And so it's hopefully a useful resource to people.
I'm sharing that on the screen right now,
Great.
and then I'm gonna drop that into chat as we move into our discussion. And uh, Ailene, let me start with you. What what's on your mind? What are some things that you've seen out there? Do you have any tips or suggestions for our audience? And folks in the audience, feel free to type in any questions, comments, ideas that you've got, and we'll kick this off with some uh, expert guidance from our panel members, and then we will jump into a nice interactive discussion.
When we think about people planning as they age, the question I get asked most often, and it likely happens to Sara and Nancy and anyone else who works in this subject, is where do I start? What piece do I start with? And obviously, that's as unique for the four of us on the screen as it is for everyone attending. And so for me, the foundational piece of planning for solo aging and aging in general is a strong age-diverse support network. Age diversity because it gives you the opportunity to interact and be a resource to other people and benefit from different stages of life and availability. And that support network really is that foundation for all the other pieces someone explores when they're coming up with an aging plan.
I love it. I've been calling that building our personal village. I sort of tacking on the fact that the village movement is so powerful, but our personal village can be supplemented by a village that we join, or vice versa. It seems like on a lot of these solo aging discussions, making friends and building the network can be so challenging because we may have not made a new friend in 20 years, and it's kind of revisiting, how do I do that and exercise that muscle again? Do you all find that that's a topic that you're coaching people on?
Often.
Great suggestion to kick things off, Ailene. Sara, how about you? Any sort of words of wisdom or discussion topic that you'd like to throw on the table today?
I totally agree with Ailene that building what I call the social network, but village sounds kind of more friendly. I think in more academic terms, I guess. But building a social network is so critical, but it actually goes hand in hand with the estate planning that everybody needs to do. Because one of the more difficult things, or probably the most difficult thing that I find solo agers kind of scratching their heads about is who can be my proxies? And when I say proxies, your estate attorney or whoever's helping you develop that estate plan is going to ask you, who do you want to speak for you if you cannot? That's your advanced medical directive. Who do you want to manage your finances if you're incapable of doing that? That's your power of attorney for finances. As you build that social network, those pieces can much more easily fall into place. But if you're sitting out there not knowing where to start in any direction, then I agree with Ailene. Start by building your social network, and then the other things may become, the other tasks that you have to do with regard to planning may become just so much easier.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I've often found really interesting is when we do sort of solo age, when you have an event where solo ages are gathering, people that identify as solo aging, and you've got 3 or 4 people in the room that are all like, I need to find a proxy. It's oftentimes I've seen where they start having conversations and it's sort of like, wait, we could be proxies for each other. You know, we're both in the same boat. Um, but it's something that we can dive deeper into today. Um, uh, I love it. Building your personal network, proxies. Nancy, what log do you want to throw on the fire here? And actually, I kind of want to pick on you. I hope I'm not derailing what you wanted to say, but I think when I have conversations with you, they feel very authentic because you are personally on a solo aging journey in addition to helping people on that journey.
You're right. I think that's one of the things that helps me to better relate to folks is that I am on that solo aging journey and I am facing the same challenges. I can share what I've learned, but we all have much more to learn as we work collaboratively. I think the biggest thing that I want to say today is that it follows a mantra that I have, and it's we can all have a say about how things will go and where we'll end up. And it's just that simple. It's the building our team, our village, I call it a microboard. But, we need to give some thought to how this is going to go. We need to give some thought about how can I maintain my independence and have my say and continue to have my say. Now, most patient advocates will talk a lot about the healthcare proxy because that's our wheelhouse. But who will speak for me if I'm unable? And how can I make that rock solid? And so we have a lot of conversations, not only about how to start, but the proxy conversations are key, as is community. So we've touched on a lot. We've got a lot to unpack.
All right. This is great. And I knew that this was going to happen, is that you throwing out these 3 concepts and ideas would trigger a bunch of questions and comments. And let me start addressing some of these, but feel free to jump in if there's another topic that comes to mind that you'd like to share with the community. So let's see. Where are we at? Okay, Barbara says, I've written an essay about my disdain for elder orphan. It's in a book I just published. Funny you should mention it. But I want to kind of piggyback on that. Is language is so important, is that, like, as Sara discovered when she coined this phrase, is that this term elder orphan is, while it means something, it's not as powerful as solo aging. Just like when we say to somebody, hey, you should look into moving to an assisted living community, oftentimes it's just that language of assisted living can oftentimes make people say, I'm not ready yet. So Barbara, thanks for that comment.
Steve, the flip side to that can be there could be people on this attending this or watching this as recorded who are very connected to the phrase they use: solo, soloist, elder orphan, solo ager, Bob, whatever, right? I always joke that we're not going to issue a membership card. It's not a membership organization. You get to define your experience. For the sake of common language, Sara's coining of solo ager has been incredibly helpful, at least in my work. I think it has been for Nancy as well. But I don't want anyone to think that it's X, Y, or Z. This doesn't have boundaries, right? How we self-identify is just that. So I just wanted to throw that out there too.
Yeah, no, this is great, and you're right on with those thoughts, Aileen. I think uh, what we say could turn anybody off, and the key thing for all of us is to have an open mind. And I've seen several comments on the topic of making friends and building that network. So I think we should dive a little bit deeper on that. Beatrice, who again has been featured on our platform. She is a solo ager that moved to Mexico. She's got a great story. I'll try to find the link and drop it in there. But she says it's not just looking for friends, it's dealing with the fact that many friends with families are just not interested in your overtures. Let's kind of dive into that topic. I mean, I hear this on a regular basis. All my friends are talking about their grandkids, and I've never had kids, and I don't feel like I'm included. Any words of wisdom there?
I'm happy to jump in. I hear that a lot. I've experienced that a lot. And I believe solo agers need other solo agers just to have a comfortable place where people aren't just talking about their grandkids. So joining organizations or groups that you suspect may have a number of solo agers, volunteering, you will meet solo agers because honestly, a lot of people, when they get to be grandparent age, that's where their energy and time goes toward their grandkids. Those of us that don't have grandkids tend to put ourselves out in the community more, either with volunteering or joining a book club or a health club, or you can meet other solo agers in a lot of different places. But in a sense, I'd sum it up as solo agers need other solo agers. I run a series of workshops, local workshops in person, and I often learn that the people who met in my group have become great friends, and that's happening more and more. I hear about those things happening more and more in a lot of communities. Some villages are organizing solo aging groups. Senior centers are organizing solo aging groups. Sometimes it comes with a hands-on workshop. Sometimes it's just a support group. So I urge people to check that out and get involved in their area locally, not online. Online is wonderful, but there's nothing like a real live body to get a hug or a handshake or just have a three-dimensional body in the room with you.
Senior centers and libraries are other great places that I've seen solo agers start groups, right? Where they are, the library will give someone a room, let them book a room, and then they'll just put an announcement out and see who shows up. And there are many people who have created, and again, those things come in different phrasing. There are kinship groups, support circles, solo aging groups, right? All those different things. But community organizations will help people, give them the place to meet, the public space to meet, usually, especially if it's a grassroots driven idea.
Yeah, and that's uh something I dropped into chat. We actually did a discussion on a group in Oregon that the solo aging group just started conversations with a couple of friends. They invited some friends, and then they got adopted by one of the villages, and it kind of happened organically like that.
Yeah,
Um,
I've been in touch with them. They're a great model.
it really is cool. Okay,
Steve,
let's.
can I
Yep.
jump in here?
Oh,
You
absolutely.
just mentioned the word organic. Yes, it happens organically. I am somebody who moved to a state where I knew no one. And if anybody had to plug in personally and professionally, it was me. Now I had to build my medical team and find a place to live and then start to meet people. And as I did, I attended different things locally, trying to plug in. I found out how to volunteer, found out resources to find out how to volunteer just from talking to people at events. I learned about it online, a meetup group, but you have to go. And so I met another solo ager in the hallway looking for the event. We're still friends 2 years later. There are a lot of ways. People join. One of the stories of a friend of mine joined a dance class at a senior center, and she just said, I'm going to try it. And so she started attending this, and she met some people. And then somebody in the group had a medical problem, a hospitalization, and the group rallied around her and helped her with before, during, and after her hospitalization. And it was divvying up chores and who's gonna help, who's gonna do this. And it just occurred in the most wonderful way. And they are fast friends. When I'm in something like this too, I am always looking for older and younger activities with both, because Nancy's shopping for potential proxies, her backup people. I have people in place now, but if I'm smart as a solo ager, I'm going to have a backup. So I'm shopping because those relationships need to be kindled over time.
I
And
love it.
nurtured.
Yeah. And like Nancy, one of the things that it's sort of like owning that we are going to be we could be a solo ager at some point in time, and admitting that forces us to make plans. Okay. And one of the things that I like about your story and moving to a town where you knew nobody, that basically your back was against the wall. Okay, I can sit here alone in my apartment all day, or I can get out there and meet people. And I think one of the challenges that many of us face is that we've lived in communities for years and we had a network that may not be out there anymore. And we've got to sort of change gears and pretend like we're Nancy. I just moved into town and I'm going to figure out where everything's at,
I think there's a question in chat that Ailene can do the best job of answering. This Sue Weisenberg wants to attend a solo ager support group or find out about them. And Ailene, you do a lot of that online, and that's a great place to start.
Right. So thanks for that, Sarah. And that's a great question. And I have a feeling that if others didn't type it, they're thinking it, right? I do run discussion groups in a more formalized way through my own business. Through the Navigating Solo Network, we have programs that Sarah and Nancy have both attended and guested at as well, where we encourage people, just like today's program, right? There are 200 and something people who all are like-minded, who signed up to join us today, and probably others who are watching this on a recording. This is a great way to make additional connections right here, right now. You don't have to give your social security number or your will, but it's nice to know where people are. And so when we have programs in the Navigating Solo Network, we encourage people to connect with each other. We're in the process of launching regional groups. We've had about 400 people share that they want that, which is really exciting and speaks to the need. So I think, again, local is great because then you build those local resources. And if you can collaborate with a library or a senior center and want to start the group, right? So the staff doesn't need to do the work. They're already short-staffed, right? But they're happy to give you a room to meet in. You will find there are like-minded folks who are interested as well.
I love it. Now, Barbara says, can you provide examples of ways to build village network, volunteering church neighbors? It's difficult to ask for help. Now, before our panelists say anything, one of the things that I'm always telling people is don't ask for help. Let people know that you're willing to help first. And if they reciprocate and say, oh, I would do that for you, then you've sort of hit pay dirt, okay? But one of the problems that I found is that, oh gosh, I need somebody to do this. Let me go out there. Um, Sort of think about how you can contribute to the community and start broadcasting that and see who comes back at you. Any work,
That is
any
so true. That is so true. It's all of what goes around comes around. And if you think you're going to need help later in life, start looking around for opportunities to help someone else today. And that will pay you dividends in ways that you never imagined.
And it's also a really good human thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Okay, I am I'm sharing this. Okay, let's get back to some of these questions. I I recently read, Carolyn says, I recently read a statistic that said the number of solo agers in independent or assisted living is pitifully low because solo agers don't have someone to monitor their driving or notice when they're not paying bills. When you talk about needing solo aging proxy, this is the level where I have concerns. What do y'all think?
Yes, it is low. I have a sort of a tongue-in-cheek response to that. Most older adults move into senior living, especially into assisted living, because their kids prompt them to do that. They want them to be taken care of, or more selfishly, the kids don't want the elders moving into their basement. So where there's money to fund it, they want them to move into assisted living and they encourage that. And I think it's a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, with a lot of people who are on their own, there's nobody to do that. And the education out there about what senior living is pitifully low. It's like this silo that you don't find out anything about until you are responsible for somebody who needs it, or you want to investigate it yourself. And it really, senior living communities, who I work a lot with, should should integrate themselves more into the community so that people know they aren't the scary, nasty nursing homes that your grandmother was in. So anyway, that's why I think there's not a lot of solo agers in assisted living.
And Beatrice says it's also low because of the cost of assisted living. Solo agers are often less have less resources than a two-income couple. And certainly affordability is an issue in this area that we need to really have some focus on. The Now Paul has a question that I'd love for you all to share. He says, are you aware of private licensed fiduciaries who are available in states to help people with financial and healthcare needs? This topic seems to come up every time we have a solo aging discussion.
Of those of us on the screen, Sarah's the only one in a state, and there's one other state that has professional fiduciaries. So Sarah, would you be comfortable taking that one?
Yeah, sure. California and Arizona are the only states that I'm aware of that actually license professional fiduciaries. They are wonderful, wonderful resources for solo agers. I keep trying to find out what other states do. I know that there are some guardians who actually offer their services privately, but that's kind of, I don't know, that's fraught with difficulty. I rarely know what to say when I'm talking to people in other states. So Nancy and Ailene, you may have some thoughts about that too.
Well, I'd say there's work to be done here, folks, nationally. I live in a state that doesn't have fiduciary services. One can go out and hire if one has a budget for that. But it's right back there to me, to the notion of having our say about how things are going to go, because we need to do our homework and to find our proxies. People often ask as a patient advocate, do I serve? As will you be my healthcare agent with proxy? And the answer is mostly no, because I can only be good to about 6 people. I would need to know all of your information to be able to carry forward your wishes. We'd have to be in touch. I'd have to be available 24/7, and that's just not possible. But what I mostly want to say is that there are options there, right back to that community, right back to developing your team, developing that community, getting involved, paying it forward, which thank you for bringing that up. Because when I'm talking with people about, well, I suppose I need to tap into a faith community of some sort. And most people hasten to say, and I want to put in before I take out. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, even if you are, and Sarah, even if you are in a state where there's licensed fiduciaries, I want to remind folks that you need a relationship with these folks. Like, I think a lot of people are looking for a solution where I can just pick up the phone. Okay, now I've checked that box, healthcare and financial proxy or what have you.
Yeah.
And what I urge them to do is say, hey, look, today you don't have one, okay? And you're probably not going to have one for another 6 months. So invest that 6 months in developing a relationship to make sure that it's okay. Whether it be, and I've heard of people on one of our calls, somebody had their end of life doula. They developed a relationship with them, and that doula agreed to be a proxy, but it was a relationship.
Steve, you're touching on, oh, go ahead, Sarah.
No, doulas are another profession out there that are good resources for solo agers.
So Steve, you're touching on a subject which is near and dear to all of our hearts, which is proactive engagement of people in our board of directors, support network, whatever we choose to call it, that we have better outcomes when it's not reactive. And so nurturing those relationships, building those relationships. I also want to remind people of 2 things when it comes to advanced care planning. Think about advanced care planning as doing your homework first to figure out what you want and what you don't want. Write it down, then go find somebody to designate and an alternate. Because not everyone who walks on this planet was made to be a healthcare proxy. I have a story of a woman who came to one of my talks, and she had her best friend lined up as her healthcare proxy. They had talked about it. They had read the papers. She had her own copy, due diligence, all of that. And one day they were out for coffee, and the friend said, I never planned to step into a hospital. So the friend was like, okay, what if as my proxy, I need you to, that probably would be a deal breaker, right? So they'd gone through the paperwork, they had that conversation, and yet all those other boxes were checked off, but that piece, that nuanced piece, became something that someone became aware of. So not everyone was born to be a healthcare proxy, and we really want the folks, ideally, who can advocate for us in the best way possible.
I love it. Okay. Joe says, and everybody agreed in this, aging should be part of elementary, middle, and high school education. I really think it's true. I mean, we've really got to look at our future generations and the examples that we're setting for our kids, grandkids, and the next door neighbors on what it means to creatively navigate the chapters of life.
I have another story about that too at the end of a talk. Mm-hmm. Someone asked, why haven't we learned this in college or during our first job? And then everyone in the room laughed, because imagine your 20-something-year-old self thinking about your 50, 60, 70-year-old self. But in between that time period and the day she asked that question in the Q&A, no one had given her the opportunity to do some hard thinking about that. So that gap is really an important one.
People should be educated about the changes that occur to individuals throughout the life course, not necessarily calling out aging, but I don't think we get any education about the stages that we go through throughout our lives, and that would be helpful for learning certainly about aging as well as other stages.
Now, I have a question that I am just dropping into chat because it's kind of long, but I think this is also a great opportunity to spotlight the profession of patient advocates, which Nancy and Ailene are part of. But just to sum it up, this person is talking about suggestions for self-advocating with medical diagnostic tests to get accommodations. They find that providers can be too rough, pushing, pulling, thumping, and expecting me to do things that I can't do. And this is where having an advocate, and I don't think people are aware that this is not necessarily a proxy. This is having a relationship with a professional that can advocate for you when you're talking to medical providers. Am I on track, Ailene and Nancy, about your profession and how you can help people?
By and large, I think you are. We are people who ensure a voice, and sometimes that is making sure we go into medical situations with our questions gathered so that we get the answers that we're after. Other times we may be that voice. I'll ask the question if Mrs. Jenkins is unable to. I've had plenty of clients tell me, oh, you ask. And so we will get our answers in that. But I'm also there as scribe, historian, archivist, taking notes for absent family members so that we can debrief later and to make sure that the physician or provider's orders or recommendations for treatment are understood and followed through.
I think it's important to point out that working with an advocate is again, proactive, but it's also a positive. Bringing an advocate, whether that's a professional or a good friend, or if you have a family member with you to an appointment, is not adversarial. It's really, as Nancy just talked about, that extra eyes, ears, prompting the patient for questions, all of that. Sometimes people think, oh, if I hire an advocate, my clinical provider is going to think, that I'm mad at them. And that's not the case at all. We're just and advocates in any way are just another layer of support. So that, because it's really hard when you're in a medical appointment to catch all the information that comes your way. That's really hard. So having another teammate to do that with can be really helpful.
I love it. And I think like you said, we've got to be proactive here, folks, because when everybody wants their patient advocate is when they're entering the hospital. Just like nobody wants grab bars in their bathroom until they're coming home from the hospital. And you've got to do some of these things in advance. Okay. Well, Elva has a question since we started talking about patient advocates. How much do each of these advocates charge for their services? Can you give us some ideas on what an advocate might cost throughout the country?
This is a frequent question whenever we speak and present, correct, Ailene?
Yep.
Let me say that it will vary by two things. First of all, section of the country. Geographics has a lot to do with it. You can imagine that in the Northeast or Boston or LA, there's going to be a higher price than where I am in South Carolina. It also depends on the credentials. What is that particular person bringing to the party? I, as an undergrad social worker and with master's work in counselor education, may command one rate, whereas an MD may command a higher and deserve a higher rate. So it depends on our credentials. As far as the United States, I'd say patient advocates run anywhere between $100 and $350 an hour.
Okay, great question on a topic that I absolutely love, and that's co-housing and shared housing. Brian says, is co-housing and shared housing a popular option for solo aging? And Brian, while our panel members are answering the question, I'm going to drop in the National Co-housing and Shared Housing websites.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. And I noticed that somebody on the chat asked for that link, so I'm glad you're putting that in, Steve. Co-housing, they're different. Co-housing is an organized operation. It's a grassroots thing that happens when a group of people get together and decide they want to create a community where they can live together, an intentional community. And there are a couple hundred, maybe 250 now around the US. You may or may not live in an area where there is one, but it's easy to find out on one of these two websites, which is cohousing.org and cohousing.com. I'm a big fan of co-housing, but it is not inexpensive. In a sense, you are buying a little cottage, or you're buying what looks more like a condominium, and you are living in community with other people, which is the beautiful thing. You have your own home where you have your own kitchen and do all your own meals and whatnot. It doesn't differ financially or legally from owning a condo. So it's not like a commune. You don't share everything, you don't pool your resources, but you do buy into it. Shared housing, on the other hand, is just people agreeing to live together, to share expenses, to be each other's support system. I'm a huge fan of that too. I've seen a handful of situations, I'm sure there are more around the country, picking up steam as the years go by, where a group of women or a group of men or even a few couples decide they want to live together. And just be one another's support system. Often it's one person who has a large home and they want to share it with others who, in a sense, rent a room. But these arrangements can become loving, caring arrangements for the people over time. So those are my brief definitions of each.
I love it. And then there's just talking to your friends. I mean, as you're building your village, you may have somebody that you get along with, and sharing housing is a great way to minimize loneliness and isolation and save money. It's a great solution. It takes years to develop a co-housing community from the ground up, and so you might be waiting if there's not one in your neighborhood. Let me follow up on that question I asked about advocating in a medical. The person said she was specifically asking about how not to get hurt in a medical test. Would the advocate come into the room during a mammogram to make sure I don't get hurt? Thoughts on that?
I have been in rooms during medical testing with the permission of the patient. Sometimes I'm just there for the discussion part, the Q&A part, or the evaluation part. But yes, I've been present to make sure that if there was a physical or cognitive issue, that my client was treated properly and not compromised, and that the test had the best outcome it could.
And this always comes up when we bring up any profession, whether it be elder law, aging life care, and now patient advocates. Christy asks, are there any resources for people who cannot afford the fees of a patient advocate? A lot of these services seem to cater more to folks that have money.
I actually, along those lines, actually partnered with a couple of local councils on aging here in Massachusetts, where they applied for and received grants for healthcare advocacy services. So they were able to provide that for their community members and not have the cost of hiring an hourly professional be a barrier to accessing those services. People don't know it often is available in terms of healthcare advocacy, patient advocacy, but you could always explore in your community connecting with a council on aging or or AAA, an area agency on aging, and see if there are ways to access some funding so that the professional still gets paid for their time, and that people are able to benefit from that. Someone also put the Patient Advocate Foundation in chat, and that's an outstanding resource as well.
Okay, let's dive into this because I know it's an important discussion topic, and I'm also seeing that we're almost at an hour. How about, if it's okay with you all, we'll answer questions for maybe like 5 or 10 more minutes. And then folks, remember, like, we're going to have an after party where you can meet each other. So I'll open up that room and you can hang out and you can meet other folks and we can chat with each other a little bit. But Matthew says, in other states without fiduciaries, the licensed fiduciaries, what should we do? And we've sort of talked a little bit about this, but let's dive into it again. So somebody who's looking for a proxy, like, what are some steps that they should begin taking?
The way that I go about it is with a lot of words that begin in D. I have to decide what it is I want. So I have to do a little self-assessment. Then I have to get my legal ducks in a row and have my wishes documented, document by way of advance directives, living will, etc. And then I need to, in doing so, I am designating who will be my person or persons, or with an alternate, because we're smart like that, right, y'all? And then we have full discussion. Going back to Aileen's story, the person had discussions. She had her documentation. She made her decisions, but new information came forward that changed the course of that proxy relationship. So discussion is big, because I don't want people to say, I'm the power of attorney designate. I didn't know. Or be the person behind the curtain who says, I don't, she said in 1986, she wanted this. These need to be current conversations.
I refer to that as advanced care planning in 4D, even though I'm well aware there are not yet 4 dimensions, but it's a convenient way to refer to it.
I love it. Now, back to patient advocates. Does Medicare cover the cost of a patient advocate or of a fiduciary, like in the states that they're licensed?
Fiduciary, no. There were starting to be, in the last calendar year, there were 2 codes that were established for patient navigation. They had to go through an MD had to be the sponsor of that. The reimbursement rate was low, as things are in that kind of system. I don't know where they stand currently in terms of us being able to access that. But that is often, being able to pay for it is often a barrier for people. And so if there are ways for people to partner with community organizations to perhaps aid in that, that can be helpful. Sarah won't pay for a fiduciary. Yeah.
Medicare doesn't pay for care unless it's medical.
Right.
That's the big shock for everybody. Medicare doesn't pay for assisted living. Medicare doesn't pay for bringing people in to help you with recovering from a hip transplant or a knee replacement. That's not covered.
Man. Okay. Here's yeah, we're
Yeah,
not
what
we
do you
can do
say?
about that, folks, and we just hope that Medicare pays for those medical things here
Right.
in the near
Yes.
future.
Yeah.
Catherine says, how many backups are appropriate to have for a power of attorney, medical power of attorney, and trustee? I struggle to even find one.
I'm a fan of two if you can, at least two. Nancy, what's your comfort number? I'm aware that it's very difficult often to designate one. Ideally, having a backup is very helpful, having an alternate.
I agree. And that's exactly what I did when I moved to South Carolina and had to have surgery pretty quickly. I had my primary, I Zoomed with my primary and my secondary to make sure that they understood and they had those documents in their hands so that they would be able to serve, answered any questions that they may have for the grand event. But yeah, have a backup when you can. We realize that that is hard, but conversations like this is the way to get started.
Um, and Kelly has a great comment that ties into this. She says, before the call ends, I would like to say this. Always have a plan B. I've had 3 people who I thought would help execute my wishes when I die, or if in the process of dying. All 3 have passed away. I never thought that would happen. My tribe is shrinking. You know, the other thing, like oftentimes this solo aging I've had people come on these discussions and say, gosh, this is so depressing. I feel so, alone or what have you. But I feel the opposite way. I feel people that attend solo aging discussions are actively understand that they need to take care of their affairs, that nobody is going to do it for us. And so the other thing, and this was on that discussion with the solo aging support group, there was a woman on there that came on and she said, I love my husband dearly. He was amazing, but he's gone. I've grieved. And I love traveling on my own. I wish I had known about this way back when. She has found it more enjoyable to go to travel by herself to be able to go where she wants, to pick people that she wants to go with and wants to hang out with. So this should not be depressing. This is an active, purposeful community that we're talking to here.
Also, lifelong learning is a major commitment in terms of as we age, right? Hopefully, we all are committed as lifelong learners. And I always say to people at my talks or on a Zoom, congratulations, you can check that off. You logged in today, right? So you're committed to lifelong learning. And so when you're feeling that overwhelm or even depressed about it, remember, you're taking steps for you, and every one of those steps looks different for every single person interacting with this video.
Oh,
I think we've actually kind of come full circle. Because
Right.
if you remember, in the very beginning, Nancy and Ailene and I, all 3, agreed that the most important component to solo aging is building our community around us. They will support us, they will help us, and if you pay it forward by helping them, it'll come back to you in spades. So that's really what it's all about. There aren't a lot of services out there that can help us, even if we can pay for them. So look around you, look internally, look at the community that you belong to.
I love it. And folks, we're going to jump into the after party in a moment, and that's another way where maybe we can make some connections better in that after party. Let's try it out. But before we do that, and before I let our panel members each make a closing statement, Christy says, attorney here, backup power of attorneys are often discouraged because they get interpreted as needing both to agree. So again, this is one of these things that attorneys often tell me. If you're drafting documents, you need to be very clear in how you're communicating that. But
That just affirms that you need to do your homework first before you then seek out the attorney to help you with the document or assign a proxy, et cetera.
Okay. So I know we got through most of the questions, folks, which is good. We're going to have the after party, which I'll open up after I just want to give our panel members an opportunity. Is there anything that you didn't say or that we didn't cover that you think we ought to cover? And then we'll people be able to move into the after party if they choose.
I'd just like to say to everyone here or watching the recording, thank you for being here. I respect you because you're seeking. And there are resources out there. Many have been listed in the chat. Anybody on this panel would be happy to field questions for you and get you started or get you unstuck. And so there is help, and we're part of your community. Please call upon us.
I love it. Ailene, Sara, any last words of wisdom? I see people are already going into the after party room.
Well, that's good.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm good. I said my piece.
Yeah.
Sara,
And
again,
I know
thanks.
we could all discuss solo aging infinitely. So if you give us the opportunity, we'll keep going. But it's a really important topic, Steve, and I'm really grateful that you are continuing to offer people opportunities to learn from people and share with each other.
Thanks so much. And Sara, thanks for coining a term that the public is proud of. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like people refer to themselves as a solo ager, and I think that's super important. Or a soloist or a solo or whatever, as we had discussed earlier. All right, folks. Well, if you would like to jump into the after party room, down at the bottom there should be a button that says you can jump in there. If you're having difficulty getting in, I can manually move you there. Just type "I'd like to join" in chat and I'll move you there manually. But I hope that and panel members, feel free to jump in that room. You would be a celebrity there in that room. So I think it'll be interesting to see the conversations. Okay. All right, let's see. I'm gonna do my best to, you know what? Let me see. I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this. You know what, folks? I'm just gonna start. Ailene, Nancy, and Sara, would you like to go into okay, so I'm just going to move you in there. And then I'm just going to start moving folks in as well as I can. Okay. Let's see. Okay, Corey. Let's see. I see Corey wants to go in. So at the bottom of your screen, there should be a button that says join breakout room. So if I don't get you in, uh, why am I? Okay. She's already in there. Okay. Ernestine, I see your message there. I'm going to try to get you. Okay. Ernestine, I am adding you to solo aging to the breakout room. And let's see, Silva. Who? Don't have. I don't have you there anymore. Looks like you may have gone. I'd like to. Uh, Amy. Okay, moving you to the breakout room. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna go down and I'm just gonna move anybody that's here into the room, and then you can just choose to choose to leave the breakout room or not accept. Okay. Yeah. I'm just kind of going down. It's the chat was too hard to so I'm just prompting anybody who's not in there to have the choice to go in. And as I'm babbling here, if you are looking, there should be a button on the bottom of your screen that says breakout room solo aging after party. So, and I'm just doing my best to go through and get those who may have not joined already and don't like sitting here listening to my voice. Okay. All right. So at least now it looks like everybody has had an invitation if they are not in the after party already. And let me stop.